and systems of audit take on a momentum of their own. Their very existence depends on measuring. They feed on measurement, and they grow fat on ever-increasing mounds of boxes of ticks and boxes of crosses. The belief in the merit of the audit, in the merit of measurement, weighs down every bureaucracy until it collapses under its own pudding of lard, only to be revived by someone else who fails to understand that there are callings, there are arts, and there are skills which defy the pedestrian and cannot be measured. And the paradox of days like today is that everything you've learnt and heard, or perhaps everything you should have learnt and heard today, is aimed at breaching the confines of stricture and of regulation, of allowing the true markers of intelligence, curiosity, and intelligence to run free. Such liberty and independence of thought are surely the hallmarks of an advocate. But you won't find any way of measuring them. And the rebarbative judge, whose only anxiety appears to be lest the case overrun or he misses the train, wouldn't recognize, let alone welcome, such attributes, or gives no evidence that he does, even when they are paraded daily before his very eyes. No, they groan at the flair they never possessed, or even worse, they decry a lapse in standards they assert without any evidence. They who have never addressed a jury in their lives, who've sat behind first juniors, second juniors, leaders, and leaders listening to the ring of the Russian till they have the temerity themselves to suggest that without a proper bureaucracy of standards, the deterioration in advocacy they so blindly see will get even worse. It is, of course, as Bentham said, rubbish on stilts. And the height from which they make such lofty comments give them a spurious authority. But if they'd had any experience of what they say was a golden age, it's odd, isn't it, how the golden age is always at some time when the memory of man runneth not to the contrary, some 10 years before. If they really had had any experience of watching advocates in the past, they'd know that today there are far, far fewer of the ditherers, the incoherent, the illiterate, the wasters, and the drunk. Now that I've reached my anecdotage, I can tell you stories you wouldn't believe of the incompetent who survived until they reached the Crown Court bench, and the lazy who woke from their termly doze to achieve elevation to the High Court bench and way, way beyond. One can only assume that these Cassandras who believe that advocacy has deteriorated and can only survive by subjecting it to the audit of the bean counter and the shelf checker suffer from collective myopia. But how would one know whether they suffer from blindness or merely from ignorance? They suffer, perhaps from a more general inability, of which we're all from time to time guilty, an inability to look, an unwillingness to see. All of you here today who've been so patient today will know what perhaps these others have never understood, that for all the endless lessons, talks, speeches, lists of do's and lists of don'ts. The very best way of learning, improving, correcting and advancing is to watch others, to watch our opponents, or to sit in court and listen to others on a hot and sweaty day in court number 6 or some such. That moment when the advocate talks too fast or too slow, too soft or too loudly, loses her place or his breath control, fiddles with his ribbon or scrapes too energetically with her bow. Or those glorious moments when one phrase, one word, compels the judge to see what he's never seen before, the point. Or change his mind, or even shut up for one moment and listen. Moments of refined gold, perhaps, rare and precious. Do we really want to kill them? It is, after all, those moments for which the client relies upon you, which earns you your pittance and which justifies the slog. Must they all be snuffed out in the spirit of standards? Do we care how we write? Must every skeleton belie its name as it becomes more adipose? It's small wonder they become so fat when their progeny, the written judgment, becomes ever longer, more unreadable, with its index, its headlines of introduction, arguments, discussion, conclusion. Do you not groan when 9 different justices all reach the same conclusion with endless quotation on the way, and all give different reasons? It's those very people who will judge the quality of your written work when they're not marking you down as they confuse courage with obduracy. And as the bland leave the bland ever further down the path of plastic mediocrity, it is only you, the advocates, armed with your points, who can and should resist. Strike out!